The December wind howled against the windows of the Whitmore estate, but inside the parlor, the cold came from something far worse than weather. Clara stood before her father's massive oak desk, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Around her, the room that had once felt like home now resembled a courtroom, with her family seated in judgment. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. You will marry Edmund Garrett, her father Charles Whitmore said flatly. His voice carried the same tone he used when dismissing servants. The banns will be read this Sunday. Clara's mother sat rigid in her chair by the fireplace, her face a careful mask of disapproval. Her two older sisters, Victoria and Penelope, exchanged knowing glances. They had both married well, traded their freedom for security and social standing without a whisper of protest. "I won't do it, Father." Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I don't love him. I don't even know him." Charles slammed his hand on the desk, making me inkwell jump. "Love? You speak to me of love?" Edmund Garrett is the son of the most successful banker in 3 counties. This marriage secures our family's future, consolidates our holdings. Your feelings are irrelevant. "My feelings are all I have," Clara said quietly. Her mother finally spoke, her words sharp as glass. "Your feelings? What about your duty? What about your family's reputation? We have given you everything: education, comfort, opportunity. And this is how you repay us? With childish rebellion?" Victoria leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Clara, be reasonable. Edmund is handsome enough, wealthy, respected. What more could you possibly want?" "A choice," Clara answered. "The ability to decide my own future." Penelope laughed, a brittle sound. "A choice? Women like us don't get choices, Clara. We get security. We get position. That's the trade we make." "Then I won't make it." The silence that followed was deafening. Charles stood slowly, his face darkening. "You won't make it," he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "Very well, then you'll make nothing at all." He walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the snow-covered grounds. "I gave you 1 week to come to your senses. That week is over. If you will not honor this family, you will not be part of it." Clara felt the floor shift beneath her feet. "Father, you can't mean. I mean exactly what I say." He turned to face her, and his eyes held no warmth, no recognition of the daughter he'd once bounced on his knee. "You have until morning to pack a single bag. Take what you can carry. After that, you are no longer a Whitmore." "Charles," her mother said, but there was no real protest in her voice, only a performative concern. "No. Margaret, she's made her choice. Now she'll live with it." He looked at Clara with something almost like satisfaction. "Perhaps a taste of the real world will cure you of these romantic notions. When you're cold and hungry and alone, you'll understand what you've thrown away." Clara's heart hammered in her chest, but she refused to cry, refused to give them the satisfaction. "I understand perfectly what I'm throwing away. The question is whether you understand what you're losing." Victoria stood abruptly. "How dare you speak to Father that way?" After everything, Clara interrupted. "I've learned that there are worse things than poverty. Being owned is one of them." The slap came from her mother, swift and shocking. Margaret Whitmore had never raised her hand to any of her daughters before. The crack of palm against cheek echoed in the parlor. "You will not speak such vulgarity in this house," her mother hissed. "We tried to raise you properly, tried to instill in you the values of a lady, but you've always been willful, always difficult." Clara touched her burning cheek, tasting blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. "I was myself. I'm sorry that was never enough." Charles returned to his desk, already dismissing her. "Sarah will help you pack. Be gone by dawn." And Clara, he looked up one last time. Don't expect to come crawling back when reality strikes. This door closes permanently. That night, Clara moved through her room like a ghost, selecting what to take from a lifetime of accumulated possessions. Her hands trembled as she folded a spare dress, a warm shawl, her mother's silver hairbrush, though she wasn't sure why she included that last item. Sarah, the housemaid who'd practically raised her, wept openly as she helped. "Miss Clara, where will you go? What will you do?" "I don't know, Sarah, but I'll figure it out. This is madness, all over a marriage. Couldn't you just say yes and then find a way later?" Clara paused in her packing. Say yes and become a liar? Trap myself in a life I don't want, hoping for an escape that might never come? No, I'd rather face the unknown honestly than live a comfortable lie. Sarah pulled her into a fierce embrace. "You're the bravest person I've ever known, or the most foolish. I haven't decided which." "Perhaps both," Clara said with a sad smile. As the first gray light touched the horizon, Clara descended the main staircase one final time, her single bag clutched in her hand. The house was silent, her family still abed, or perhaps simply unwilling to witness her departure. Only her father waited by the front door, dressed impeccably despite the early hour. He handed her an envelope without a word. Clara opened it too. "Find $20 and a train ticket to Denver, dated for that morning." "Your mother insisted," he said, his voice empty of emotion. "She couldn't bear the thought of you with nothing at all. Consider it her final gift. There will be no others." "Tell her ... double quotes," Clara started, then stopped. What was there to say? "Tell her I understand." Charles opened the door, and the December cold rushed in, stealing her breath. "The carriage will take you to the station. After that, you're on your own." Clara stepped out into the snow, her boots crunching on the pristine white. She turned back once, looking at the grand house that had been her entire world. Lights were beginning to appear in windows, the household stirring to life. Somewhere up there, her mother and sisters were waking to a home without her. She didn't wave, she didn't cry. She simply turned and climbed into the waiting carriage. The train station bustled with activity, even at this early hour. Farmers heading to market, businessmen traveling between towns, families starting journeys to distant relatives. Clara sat on a hard wooden bench, her bag at her feet, waiting for the westbound train. She had no plan beyond Denver. No connections, no prospects, no idea what a woman alone might do in a frontier city. The $20 in her pocket felt simultaneously like a fortune and like nothing at all. "Miss Whitmore?" She looked up to find Edmund Garrett himself standing before her, impeccably dressed as always, his expression a mixture of surprise and something darker. "Mr. Garrett." She stood, instinctively smoothing her skirts. "Your father told me you'd left." I didn't believe him. He studied her face, noting the bruise on her cheek where her mother's ring had caught the skin. "He said you refused me, that you'd rather face ruin than become my wife. He told you the truth." Edmund's jaw tightened. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The humiliation you've caused me. I'm the laughingstock of the entire county." "I'm sorry for that," Clara said, and meant it. "But I couldn't marry you. It wouldn't have been fair to either of us." "Fair?" He laughed harshly. "You speak of fairness? I offered you everything: status, wealth, security. And you spit in my face." "I offered you honesty," Clara countered. "Would you truly want a wife who came to you out of obligation rather than choice?" For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, perhaps recognition, perhaps respect. But it vanished quickly, replaced by cold anger. "I hope your honesty keeps you warm, Miss Whitmore. The world is not kind to women without protection." He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing on the platform. Clara sank back onto the bench, suddenly exhausted. The train whistle sounded in the distance, growing closer. As she boarded the westbound train, Clara Whitmore left behind everything she'd ever known. She had no way of knowing that the ticket in her hand would carry her not to Denver, but to a snowstorm, a near-death experience, and a weathered rancher who would challenge everything she thought she knew about freedom, safety, and what it meant to truly choose your own path. The train pulled away from the station, carrying her toward an uncertain future. Behind her, the town of her childhood faded into the winter landscape. Ahead lay only questions, but for the first time in her life, those questions were hers alone to answer. The train rattled westward for 3 days, each mile taking Clara further from everything familiar. She sat by the window, watching the landscape transform from rolling farmland to harsh, open prairie. The other passengers changed at each stop, families heading to homesteads, miners chasing rumors of silver strikes, women in elaborate hats traveling to meet distant relatives. Clara spoke to almost no one. Her bruised cheek drew curious glances. But frontier etiquette meant most people minded their own business. She ate sparingly from the bread and cheese she'd purchased at the first stop, trying to stretch her limited funds. On the second night, as the train paused at a small Wyoming station, an elderly woman took the seat beside her. Her weathered face suggested a life spent outdoors, and her direct gaze held no judgment, running from something or running to something. The woman asked without preamble. Clara considered lying, then decided against it. From smart girl. Though you'll find that what you're running from has a way of following. The woman pulled out knitting needles and began working on a half-finished scarf. Where are you headed? Denver. After that, I'm not certain. The woman's needles clicked rhythmically. Denver's crowded, full of people trying to strike it rich or pretending they already have. A woman alone. She let the sentence hang. I'll manage, Clara said, though she had no idea how. I'm sure you will. You've got that look about you, the one that says you'd rather starve than surrender. The needles never stopped moving, but pride's cold comfort in January. My name's Ruth Brennan. I run a boarding house in Leadville, if you change your mind about Denver. Room and board in exchange for housework. The offer stands if you need it. Clara took the card Ruth offered, touched by the unexpected kindness. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Leadville's rough country miners, gamblers, men who forgot what civilization looks like. But it's honest work and honest pay. Ruth studied her with shrewd eyes. Whatever you left behind, it marked you. But out here, nobody much cares about your past. They care whether you can pull your weight. When Ruth departed at the next station, Clara found a wool scarf tucked beside her, the one the old woman had been knitting. Wrapped inside was another $5 and a note for emergencies. Pay it forward when you can. Clara pressed the scarf to her face, allowing herself a moment of tears. The train pushed deeper into Colorado territory, climbing into mountains that made Clara's breath catch. Snow clung to peaks that seemed to touch the sky. The air grew thinner, colder, and the train's pace slowed as it navigated treacherous passes. At a fuel stop called Granite Junction, the conductor made an announcement that sent murmurs through the car. Snowstorms moving in from the north. We're stopping here until it passes. Could be a few hours, could be a day. There's a hotel in town if you want proper beds. Clara counted her remaining money, $16 after purchasing food. A hotel would drain precious resources. She decided to wait on the train. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But as the afternoon wore into evening and the storm intensified, the temperature inside the cars dropped dramatically. Other passengers bundled in blankets, some heading into town despite the cost. Clara wrapped Ruth's scarf tighter and tried to sleep. She woke in darkness to find the train nearly empty. Through the frosted windows, she could see nothing but swirling white. Her fingers had gone numb despite her gloves. A different conductor, making rounds, stopped at her seat. "Miss, you can't stay here. We're shutting down the heating to conserve coal. You'll freeze. How much is the hotel?" $2 a night, plus meals. $4 minimum, maybe more. Clara did the calculation quickly. It would leave her with almost nothing when she reached Denver. But freezing to death would solve nothing. "I'll go to the hotel," she said, standing on stiff legs. "Smart choice. Storm's getting worse. Might be stuck here for a few days." The walk from the train to the town was brutal. Wind-driven snow stung Clara's face, and within minutes she was disoriented. The few buildings visible through the whiteout seemed to shift and disappear. She followed other passengers, clutching her bag, but they moved faster than she could manage in her city shoes. Suddenly, she was alone. The buildings had vanished. She couldn't see the train behind her or the town. Ahead, panic fluttered in her chest. "Keep moving," she told herself. Standing still means death. She pushed forward, but her sense of direction was gone. The cold seeped through her coat, through Ruth's scarf, into her bones. Her teeth chattered so violently she bit her tongue. Time lost meaning. She might have walked for 5 minutes or 50. Her legs moved mechanically, even as feeling left them. The bag grew impossibly heavy, and she dropped it without really noticing. When Clara fell, it wasn't dramatic. Her legs simply stopped working, and she found herself kneeling in snow that reached her waist. She tried to stand, but her body wouldn't obey. "This is absurd," she thought with strange clarity. "I survived my family's rejection only to die in a snowstorm." 3 days later, she thought of her mother, her sisters, her father's cold eyes. Part of her wondered if they'd even learn of her death, or if she'd simply disappear, another nameless casualty of Western ambition. Clara curled onto her side, tucking her frozen hands under her arms. The snow was surprisingly soft, almost welcoming. She'd heard freezing to death was peaceful at the end. Your body grew warm, your mind drifted away. She closed her eyes, in her fading consciousness. She heard something, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. A low, rhythmic noise. Animal breath, perhaps. She forced her eyes open and saw a dark shape materializing from the white, massive and undefined. A horse. Someone was on horseback. She tried to call out, but her voice emerged as barely a whisper. The rider passed within yards, and she thought she'd missed her chance. Her eyes fell closed again. Then hands were on her, lifting her. A man's voice, rough and urgent. "Jesus Christ, what are you doing out here?" She tried to answer, but her jaw wouldn't work. "Stay with me," the voice commanded. "Don't you dare die on me." Strong arms lifted her across the saddle. She felt the horse begin to move, the man's body warm against her back, one arm locked around her waist. She wanted to thank him, to explain, but darkness pulled her down. She surfaced briefly to firelight and voices, the man and someone else arguing. Madness bringing her here, wasn't going to let her freeze. Don't know anything about her. Then darkness again. When Clara next woke, she was in a bed. Not the train, not the snow, but an actual bed with quilts piled high. A fire crackled somewhere nearby. Her body ached in strange ways, and her fingers and toes burned with returning circulation. She turned her head slowly. She was in a small cabin, rough-hewn logs, simple furniture, but clean and surprisingly warm. A man sat in a chair by the fire, his back to her, shoulders hunched forward. "Hello?" Her voice came out as a croak. The man turned, and Clara got her first clear look at her rescuer. He was perhaps 40, with dark hair streaked with gray, a weathered face, and eyes that were cautious but not unkind. He wore work clothes, flannel shirt, worn trousers, boots that had seen years of use. "You're awake." He stood but didn't approach. "How do you feel?" "Cold, confused, alive, I think." "All good signs." He poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup and brought it to her. Though he kept his distance, setting it on a small table within her reach. "You were about 10 minutes from death when I found you. Maybe less." Clara struggled to sit up, and he moved forward instinctively to help, then caught himself and stepped back. She managed on her own, though her head spun. "Thank you. I don't know what happened. I was walking to the hotel, and then I couldn't find anything. Whiteout. Happens fast in these mountains. Killed more than one newcomer." He returned to his chair by the fire. "I'm Wyatt Yenzen. This is my ranch, or what passes for one. You're about 5 miles from Granite Junction." 5 miles? Clara looked at the window, seeing nothing but darkness and snow. "How did you find?" "Me? Luck, or maybe stupidity. I was bringing one of my horses back from town when the storm hit. Saw something dark in the snow. Figured it was a fallen branch until I got closer." Clara took a shaky sip of water. "I'm Clara Whitmore, or I was. I don't know what I am now." Wyatt's expression shifted slightly, recognition of the pain in her words. "Right now you're a woman who needs to recover. We'll figure out the rest later." "I can't pay you," Clara said quickly. "I have some money, but not much, and I needed to. I'm not asking for payment." His voice was firm. "You rest, you heal, and when the storm passes, I'll take you back to town. That's all there is to it." Clara studied him, trying to understand. In her experience, men didn't help women without expecting something in return. But Wyatt Yenzen had already turned back to the fire, dismissing the subject entirely. Outside, the storm howled like something alive. But inside the small cabin, Clara felt safer than she had in weeks. She didn't know this man, didn't understand why he'd risked his life for a stranger, but exhaustion was pulling her back toward sleep. "Mr. Yenzen?" she said softly. "Wyatt, thank you. For my life." He didn't turn around, just nodded once. "Get some sleep, Clara Whitmore. Tomorrow we'll see what you're made of." As she drifted off, Clara realized that for the first time since leaving home, she wasn't afraid. And that terrified her more than anything. Clara woke to pale morning light filtering through frost-covered windows. The storm had quieted, leaving behind an eerie silence broken only by the snap of logs in the fireplace. She sat up carefully, testing her body. Her fingers and toes still ached, but the dangerous numbness had passed. The cabin looked different in daylight, larger than she'd thought, though still modest. One main room served as kitchen, dining area, and living space. A loft above held what she assumed was Wyatt's sleeping quarters. The bed she occupied was tucked in an alcove, separated from the main room by a curtain that currently hung open. Wyatt stood at the stove, his back to her, doing something with a cast-iron skillet. The smell of frying bacon made her stomach growl. Audibly, "You're lighter on your feet than most," he said without turning. "Most people make the floorboards creak." "I didn't mean to startle you. You didn't." He glanced over his shoulder. "How's the pain? Manageable?" "That's a lie, but I'll allow it." He cracked eggs into the pan with practiced efficiency. "You need to eat. Your body's been through hell." Clara stood, wrapping a quilt around her shoulders. She'd been changed into a man's shirt, Wyatt's, she assumed, that hung to her knees. Her own clothes lay folded on a chair, cleaned and drying. Heat rushed to her face. "Did you? Mrs. Patterson from the neighboring ranch came by last night after you fell asleep. She's the one who changed you, tended to the frostbite on your toes." Wyatt kept his attention on the eggs. "I slept in the barn." The tension in Clara's shoulders eased slightly. "That wasn't necessary." "The barn, I mean. This is your home." "Exactly, which means I decide what's necessary." He slid eggs and bacon onto 2 tin plates. "Sit, eat." The small table had 2 chairs, positioned across from each other. Clara took one, suddenly aware of how intimate this felt, sharing breakfast with a stranger in his home, wearing his shirt. But hunger overrode propriety, and the food was surprisingly good. They ate in silence for several minutes before Wyatt spoke. "The storm's passed, but the roads won't be clear for a few days. You're stuck here unless you fancy another walk through the snow." Clara set down her fork. "I don't want to impose. Perhaps I could help with chores, earn my keep until the roads clear. You have frostbite on 3 toes and bruised ribs from the cold. You're not working. I can't just sit idle while you—" "Yes, you can." His tone brooked no argument. "You'll rest, you'll heal. And when you're strong enough, we'll discuss what comes next." Clara studied him across the table. Wyatt Yenzen was nothing like the men she'd known, not polished like Edmund Garrett, not commanding like her father. His hands bore calluses and scars, his face showed years of sun and wind, and his manner was blunt to the point of rudeness. Yet there was something solid about him, something trustworthy in his directness. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. "You don't know me. I could be anyone, a thief, a liar, someone running from the law." Wyatt pushed his empty plate aside. "Could be, but I doubt it. You've got the look of someone who left something behind. By choice, not by necessity." He met her eyes. "Besides, out here, we don't ask too many questions about people's pasts. We judge by what they do now. And what have I done now except nearly die and burden you with my presence?" A hint of a smile touched his weathered face. "Ye survived. That counts for something." After breakfast, Wyatt disappeared outside to tend to his animals. Clara washed the dishes, moving slowly, then explored the cabin with growing curiosity. Books lined a shelf near the fireplace, not many but well-worn. Homer's Odyssey, a collection. Of Emerson's essays, a farmer's almanac, several veterinary manuals. A violin case rested in the corner, its leather cracked with age. She ran her fingers over the books, surprised. Somehow she'd assumed a solitary rancher would be uneducated, rough. But these choices spoke of a thoughtful mind. The door opened, bringing a gust of cold air and Wyatt stamping snow from his boots. He caught her looking at the bookshelf. "You read?" he asked, hanging his coat on a peg. "When I can. My father believed education was wasted on daughters, but my governess disagreed." Clara pulled down Emerson. "I didn't expect to find this here." "Why? Because I'm a rancher?" There was no offense in his voice, just genuine curiosity. "I didn't mean—" Clara stopped, realizing she had meant exactly that. "I apologize. That was presumptuous." Wyatt moved to the fireplace, adding another log. "I was a schoolteacher. Once. Long time ago, different life. Turns out I was better with horses than children." He straightened, brushing bark from his hands. "You're welcome to any of those books while you're here. Though I warn you, the Emerson gets preachy." "All philosophy gets preachy eventually," Clara said, and was rewarded with that small smile again. The day passed quietly. Wyatt worked outside feeding animals, checking fences, tasks that kept him occupied until late afternoon. Clara rested, read, and tried not to think about what would happen when the roads cleared. Denver still waited, but the $20 in her pocket seemed more inadequate with each passing hour. That evening, Wyatt prepared a simple dinner of salt pork and beans. As they ate, Clara noticed him favoring his left hand. "You're hurt," she observed. "Caught it on a nail earlier, nothing serious." "Let me see." "It's fine. Mr. Yenzen, Wyatt, I may not be able to work, but I can certainly bandage a wound, please." He hesitated, then held out his hand. The cut across his palm was deeper than he'd admitted, still seeping blood. Clara fetched water and clean cloth. Working with the efficiency her mother's insistence on proper household skills had instilled. "You've done this before," Wyatt said, watching her clean the wound. "My youngest sister was reckless, always falling, scraping, cutting herself." Clara wrapped the bandage firmly. "I became quite adept at first aid." "Sister, how many do you have?" "2, both older, both married, both perfectly content with the lives chosen for them." The words came out more bitter than she intended. "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear about my family troubles." "I asked, didn't I?" Wyatt flexed his bandaged hand. "Good work. Tight but not too tight." Clara returned to her seat, suddenly exhausted. "Why do you live alone out here? It seems isolating." Wyatt was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. "I had a family once. Wife, young son. Scarlet fever took them both in the same week, 12 years ago." His voice remained steady, but his jaw tightened. "Tried staying in town after, teaching, being around people. Couldn't do it. Everything reminded me of what I'd lost. So I came here, bought this land, built this cabin. The horses don't expect conversation, and the silence doesn't hurt anymore." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm so sorry. Long time ago." He stood, collecting their plates. "Your turn. What did you leave behind that was worth freezing to death in a snowstorm?" "A marriage, or rather, the expectation of one." Clara wrapped her hands around her cooling coffee. "My father arranged a match with a wealthy man I didn't love. When I refused, he disowned me. Said I was no longer his daughter. And your mother?" "Agreed with him. My whole family did. They couldn't understand why I wouldn't just comply. Make everyone's life easier." Wyatt leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Could you have compiled, I mean, married this man and lived with it?" Clara considered the question honestly. "Perhaps plenty of women do. But I kept thinking about growing old in a house full of beautiful things, married to a man I'd never truly know, becoming a stranger to myself little by little. And I realized I'd rather risk everything than guarantee that future. That's either very brave or very foolish." Ruth Brennan, a woman I met on the train, said the same thing. Clara managed a weak smile. "I'm still deciding which it is. Maybe it's both." Wyatt poured himself more coffee. "The brave and the foolish often look identical from the outside. It's only later, looking back, that you know which one you were." They sat in companionable silence as the fire burned low. Outside, the world lay buried under fresh snow, pristine and unforgiving. But inside the small cabin, Clara felt something unfamiliar, not happiness exactly, but a tentative sense of possibility. "Wyatt?" she said into the quiet. When the road's clear and I go to Denver, what will I do there? I have $16. No prospects, no skills beyond household management and passable French." The admission cost her pride, but honesty felt necessary here. "I keep acting as though I have a plan, but I don't. I ran without knowing where I was running to." Wyatt turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "You know what I've learned living alone for 12 years? Plans are overrated. Having a direction matters more than having a map." He set down his cup. "You knew you couldn't stay where you were. That's a start. The rest, you'll figure it out as you go. And if I don't? Then you'll fail, learn something, and try something else. That's how life works out here. Nobody arrives with all the answers." Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that her leap into uncertainty would lead somewhere worth landing. But doubt gnawed at her, whispering that perhaps her family had been right. Perhaps she'd thrown away security for a dream that would starve her, as if reading her thoughts. Wyatt said quietly, "Your father told you that you'd come crawling back. Didn't he? That you'd regret leaving. How did you? Because that's what powerful people do. They can't imagine strength looking different from their own." He met her eyes. "You won't go back, Clara. Not because you're too proud, but because you've already proven you'd rather face the unknown than live a lie. That kind of courage doesn't evaporate just because things get hard." The words settled over her like a benediction. In that moment, Clara realized that Wyatt Yenzen saw her more clearly than her family ever had, not as a rebellious daughter or a foolish girl, but as a person making difficult choices with integrity. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once, then stood. "Get some rest." Tomorrow, if you're feeling stronger, I'll show you the ranch. Nothing strenuous, just a walk. The mountains are beautiful after fresh snow." As Clara settled into bed that night, she listened to Wyatt's footsteps climbing to the loft. The storm had passed, but she found herself hoping the roads would take their time clearing. Not because she was afraid of what came next, but because, for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel alone, and that was worth protecting, even if only for a little while longer. 3 days after the storm, Clara stood at the cabin window watching Wyatt work with a chestnut mare in the corral. The horse was skittish, shying away from his outstretched hand, but his movements held infinite patience. He spoke to the animal in low tones Clara couldn't hear, waiting until the mare took one tentative step forward, then another. She was abused. By her previous owner, Wyatt had explained at breakfast. Bought her cheap from a man who thought beating a horse made it obedient. Now she's terrified of everyone. Clara understood that fear more than she cared to admit. Her toes had healed enough to walk without limping, and restlessness had replaced her initial exhaustion. She'd cleaned the cabin top to bottom, despite Wyatt's protests, needing to feel useful. Now she pulled on her coat cleaned and mended by the mysterious Mrs. Patterson and stepped outside. The cold hit her immediately, but it was clean and sharp, so different from the suffocating air of her father's parlor. Snow blanketed everything in pristine white, broken only by Wyatt's boot prints leading to the barn and corral. He glanced up as she approached, then returned his attention to the mare. "Thought you were resting." "I've rested for 3 days. I'll go mad if I sit inside any longer." Clara leaned against the corral fence. "How long does it take to earn her trust?" "Depends on the horse. This one's been hurt badly enough that it might take months. Or it might never happen." He took another slow step forward. The mare's ears flicked, but she held her ground. "The question isn't how long it takes. It's whether you're willing to keep trying, even when it seems hopeless." The mare suddenly lunged forward, pressing her nose into Wyatt's palm. He stroked her neck gently, murmuring approval. When he turned back to Clara, there was quiet satisfaction in his eyes. "Small victories," he said. "That's all you can ask for." Over the next week, Clara fell into the rhythm of ranch life. Wyatt still refused to let her do heavy work, but she insisted on contributing cooking meals, mending clothes, organizing his chaotic collection of veterinary supplies. She discovered he was meticulous with his animals, but careless with his own comfort, wearing shirts with missing buttons and eating whatever required the least effort. "You've been surviving, not living," she told him one evening, presenting a stew that had simmered all afternoon. Wyatt looked at the meal, actual vegetables, herbs, bread she'd baked with something approaching wonder. "I'd forgotten food could taste like this." "That's tragic and ridiculous in equal measure," he laughed, a sound that transformed his entire face. Clara realized it was the first time she'd heard him truly laugh, and something warm uncurled in her chest. After dinner, Wyatt retrieved the violin from its corner. "You mentioned liking music," he said, almost shy. "I'm rusty, but ... He played a simple folk melody, fingers stiff at first, but gradually finding confidence. The notes filled the cabin, melancholy and sweet. Clara closed her eyes, transported to a place beyond snow and isolation. When he finished, silence hung between them. "Your wife," Clara said softly. "Did she like music?" "She loved it. Made me play every evening, no matter how tired I was from teaching." His thumb traced the violin's neck. "I couldn't touch this for years after she died. Picked it up again about 5 years ago. Figured she'd be angry if I let the skill die just because she had." "She sounds remarkable." She was. Wyatt returned the violin to its case with careful hands. Lemley had this way of making ordinary things feel important. A shared meal, a sunset, a conversation about nothing. She found joy in small moments. He looked at Clara. "You remind me of her sometimes." Not in appearance, but in the way you notice things. The comparison should have felt uncomfortable, but instead touched something deep inside Clara. I think I would have liked her. She would have liked you too. Would have insisted I stop being an antisocial hermit and invite the neighbors more often. He smiled sadly. She was right about most things. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Clara was kneading bread dough when she heard horses approaching. Through the window, she saw 3 riders, 2 men, and a woman bundled in heavy coats. Wyatt opened the door, genuine warmth crossing his face. "Ben," Catherine, "Tom wasn't expecting you." The woman Catherine dismounted with practiced ease. She was perhaps 50, weathered but strong, with sharp eyes that immediately found Clara through the window. "Heard you pulled someone out of the storm. Thought we'd check that you hadn't completely forgotten how to be neighborly." The group crowded into the cabin, bringing cold air and boisterous energy. Ben Patterson, it turned out, was Mrs. Patterson's husband, a grizzled rancher with an infectious laugh. Tom Sullivan ran the cattle operation to the north, young and earnest. "So you're the girl who nearly froze," Catherine said, studying Clara without pretense. "You're looking better than when I saw you last. Could barely feel your pulse." "You saved my life," Clara said. "Wyatt mentioned you came that first night. I never properly thanked you." "Nothing to thank me for. Out here, we look after each other. It's how we survive." Catherine accepted coffee from Wyatt. "Now, what's a girl like you doing wandering through a blizzard?" Clara glanced at Wyatt, uncertain how much to share. He gave her a slight nodder. "Choice. I was headed to Denver. Got separated from the other passengers in the storm. Denver, Going to make your fortune in the city?" Ben's tone was teasing but kind. Something like that. Tom, who'd been quiet until now, leaned forward. "My sister runs a dress shop in Denver, always looking for girls who can sew. If you need work, I could write her a letter of introduction." The offer caught Clara off guard. That's very generous. "But I don't want to presume." "It's not presumption, it's practicality," Catherine interrupted. "Tom's sister Margaret is shrewd but fair. You'd work hard, but she'd pay honest wages." She studied Clara with those sharp eyes. "Though I'll be honest, you don't strike me as someone running toward something. You look like you're running away." The observation landed like a stone in still water. Clara felt exposed, defensive. Does it matter which? Might. Running away means you're still tied to what you left. Running toward means you've already cut the rope. Catherine sipped her coffee. Just something to consider. The conversation shifted to ranch business cattle prices, expected spring weather, a dispute over water rights. Clara listened, fascinated by this glimpse into a world she'd never imagined. These people lived by different rules, valued different things. Honesty mattered more than pedigree. Capability trumped social standing. After the visitors left, Clara helped Wyatt clean up. "They're good people," she said. "The best. When Emily and my son died, they kept this place running when I couldn't get out of bed. Brought food, tended the animals, never asked for thanks or explanation." He stacked the tin cups with care. "That's what community means out here. Not politeness or social calls, but showing up when it matters." Clara thought of her mother's carefully orchestrated tea parties, the performative charity work her sisters conducted. None of it had been about genuine connection, only maintaining appearances. "I don't think I've ever had that," she admitted. "Real community, I mean. Everything back home was transactional, even family." Wyatt turned to face her, drying his hands on a cloth. "Then maybe you left at exactly the right time." That evening, as Clara wrote her response to Tom's offer, accepting gratefully, she found herself hesitating. The letter would seal her path toward Denver, toward independence, toward the future she'd claimed to want, but her hand stilled over the paper. "Wyatt," she called to where he sat reading by the fire. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." When you came here, built this place, did you ever regret it? Choose isolation over whatever else you might have had. He set down his book, considering. Every day for the first 2 years, I'd wake up angry that I was alone, furious that the world kept turning when mine had stopped. He stared into the flames. Then one morning, I woke up and felt peaceful instead of empty. The silence wasn't punishment anymore, it was freedom. A chance to figure out who I was without my grief defining every moment. But don't you get lonely? Lonely. And alone aren't the same thing, Clara. I'm alone by choice. That's different from being lonely in a crowded room, surrounded by people who don't really see you. His gaze found hers. I suspect you understand the difference. She did. God help her, she absolutely did. Clara finished the letter, sealed it, but didn't feel the relief she'd expected. Instead, a strange reluctance settled over her. Denver meant opportunity, independence, the chance to build a life on her own terms. So why did leaving this small cabin, this quiet man, this harsh, beautiful landscape feel like abandoning something precious before she'd fully discovered what it was? The road should be clear enough for travel in a few days, Wyatt said, as if reading her thoughts. I can take you into Granite Junction. Make sure you get on the right train. Right, yes, of course. Clara forced brightness into her voice. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough. But that night, lying in the darkness, Clara admitted a truth she'd been avoiding. She didn't want to leave. Not yet. Maybe not ever, and that terrified her more than the storm, more than her father's rejection, more than an uncertain future in a strange city. Because wanting to stay meant risking something she'd protected fiercely since leaving home. Her newfound freedom, her determination to depend on no one, her conviction that she could survive alone. Wanting to stay meant admitting she'd found something here worth more than independence. Wanting to stay meant opening herself to the possibility of heartbreak. The question was whether she was brave enough to take that risk, or whether fear would drive her away from the first place she'd felt truly seen, truly valued, truly home. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight brought only questions and the sound of wind through pine trees and one man's quiet breathing in the loft above. Clara pulled the quilts closer and tried not to count the days she had left. The morning Clara was meant to leave, dawning clear and cold. She woke before sunrise, dressed quietly, and sat at the table with her packed bag at her feet. The cabin felt different, now not like a temporary shelter, but like a place she'd memorized down to the grain in the wooden floorboards. Wyatt descended from the loft, already dressed for the journey to town. He saw her sitting there and paused. Midway down the ladder, "You're ready early." Couldn't sleep. Clara's hands twisted in her lap. "Wyatt, I need to tell you something before we go." He crossed to the stove, beginning the morning ritual of coffee. "I'm listening." The words stuck in her throat. "How did you tell someone that 2 weeks had changed everything? That their quiet presence had shown you what safety actually felt like? That leaving felt like tearing away a piece of yourself you'd only just discovered?" "I'm grateful," she finally said, "for everything. You saved my life, gave me shelter, asked for nothing in return. I don't know how to repay that. There's nothing to repay." Wyatt poured 2 cups, set one before her. "You don't owe me anything, Clara. That's just it." She looked up at him, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "I wish I did owe you something. I wish there was a reason I had to stay instead of." She broke off, frustrated with her own cowardice. Wyatt sat down across from her, his expression careful. "Instead of what?" "Instead of wanting to stay. Wanting something I have no right to want." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Wyatt's jaw worked as if he was choosing words carefully, then discarding them. "Clara." "Eh?" Sharp knock interrupted whatever he'd been about to say. They both turned toward the door, the moment fracturing. Wyatt opened it to reveal Tom Sullivan, his young face creased with worry. "Sorry to come so early, but we've got a problem." Ben Patterson's mare is foaling, and something's wrong. Catherine sent me to fetch you. Wyatt was already reaching for his coat. How long's she been in labor? Since midnight. The foal's positioned. Wrong, and Ben's afraid if we don't get help soon, we'll lose them both. I'll get my equipment. Wyatt glanced at Clara. This could take hours. We'll have to postpone the trip to town. Go, Clara said immediately. The mare is more important. Tom looked between them, sensing something unsaid. Miss Whitmore, you're welcome to come along. Catherine could use an extra pair of hands, and honestly, it'd be good for you to see the Patterson place before you leave for Denver. Clara hesitated, then nodded. Some part of her welcomed the delay, the excuse to put off the inevitable goodbye. The ride to the Patterson ranch took 30 minutes through snow-covered trails. Clara sat behind Tom on his horse, watching Wyatt ahead of them, his posture focused and purposeful. This was a different man than the one who'd shared quiet dinners with her. This was someone with a mission. Someone needed. The Patterson ranch was larger than Wyatt's, with a main house, barn, and several outbuildings. Catherine met them at the barn door, her face drawn with exhaustion. Thank God. She's getting weaker, Wyatt. Inside, the mare lay on fresh straw, her sides heaving. Ben knelt beside her, stroking her neck, whispering encouragement. The animals' eyes rolled white with pain and fear. Wyatt dropped to his knees beside the horse, running his hands over her swollen belly with practiced gentleness. The foals turned sideways. I need to reposition it internally before she exhausts herself trying to push. Can you do it? Ben's voice cracked. I can try. Wyatt looked up at Catherine. I'll need hot water, clean towels, and someone to hold. Her head steady. The next hour was a masterclass in patience and skill. Clara watched Wyatt work with steady hands and calm voice, talking the mare through each moment of discomfort. He was elbow-deep in the birth canal, eyes closed in concentration, feeling what he couldn't see. There, he breathed. Got the front. Legs. Now she just cooperate. The mare groaned, a sound that seemed torn from her soul. Ben's face was wet with tears as he held her head, and Catherine gripped Clara's hand so hard it hurt. Come on, girl, Wyatt murmured. Almost there. Just a little more. With a sudden rush, the foal emerged tiny, wet, perfect. It lay motionless for a heartbeat, and Clara felt time stop. Then Wyatt cleared its nose and mouth, and the foal gasped, shuddered, and drew breath. The mare nickered weakly, turning her head to see her baby. Ben let out a sob of relief. You did it, Catherine whispered. God almighty, Wyatt, you actually did it. Wyatt sat back on his heels, covered in blood and fluids, his face exhausted but satisfied. She did it. I just helped her along. Clara felt something shift inside her chest, watching this man who'd saved not just her life but this animal's, who gave so freely of himself and asked for nothing in return. This was what strength looked like, not her father's domineering control, or Edmund's entitled expectations, but this quiet competence, this willingness to show up when it mattered. Later, as they cleaned up in the Patterson kitchen, Catherine pulled Clara aside. He's different with you here, you know. Clara turned from the wash basin. What do you mean? Wyatt, in the 12 years I've known him, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Catherine dried her hands on her apron. Not since Emily. Catherine, I'm leaving. Today was just a delay. Are you leaving, I mean? The older woman's gaze was penetrating. Because from where I'm standing, you look like a woman trying to convince herself of something she doesn't actually believe. Clara's throat tightened. I have to leave. I can't just... I won't trap myself again, even if the cage is more comfortable. Who said anything about cages? Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. That man would cut off his own arm before he'd trap anyone. He knows what loss feels like, what it means to be unable to save someone. He'd let you walk away, even if it killed him, because he'd rather hurt himself than risk making you feel obligated. Then what am I supposed to do? The question burst out of Clara, raw and desperate. I ran from one life because I refused to let anyone else decide my future. How is staying here any different? How is choosing him not just trading one form of dependence for another? Because choosing isn't the same as being forced. Catherine moved closer, her weathered hand covering Clara's. Your family tried to decide for you. That's not the same as you deciding for yourself, even if what you decide surprises you, even if it looks from the outside like what they wanted. But I don't know how to trust that. How do I know I'm not just settling, finding the first safe place and clinging to it out of fear? You don't. That's what makes it a choice instead of a certainty. Catherine squeezed her hand. But I'll tell you what I see. I see a woman who's been here 2 weeks and already makes that cabin feel lived in instead of survived in. I see a man who smiles again, who plays his violin, who's remembered what it's like to share space with someone. And I see 2 people terrified of wanting something because wanting means risking loss. Clara pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. What if I stay and it's wrong? What if I'm not strong enough to build a life here? What if the moon falls from the sky? Catherine's tone turned brisk. You can what if yourself right into paralysis. Or you can accept that life's uncertain, and the only real mistake is choosing nothing at all. Through the window, Clara saw Wyatt in the barn with Ben, checking on the mare and foal one final time. His movements were tired but content, and when he glanced toward the house, his eyes found hers instinctively. The connection lasted only a second, but it jolted through Clara like lightning. I'm afraid, she admitted quietly. Good. Fear means it matters. Catherine returned to the stove. The question is whether you let that fear make your choices, or whether you make them in spite of it. The ride back to Wyatt's ranch was quiet. The sun hung low, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. Clara's arms circled Wyatt's waist as she rode behind him this time, and she felt the steady rhythm of his breathing, the solid warmth of his back. Wyatt, she said into the wind. Yeah? When you said you chose to be alone, did you ever regret it? Wonder if you were just hiding instead of healing. His back tensed slightly, every damn day. But here's what I learned. Sometimes you need to hide for a while before you can heal. And sometimes healing means letting yourself want something again, even when it scares you senseless. What if wanting something isn't enough? What if I don't know how to stay? Then you learn. His voice was rough. Same way you learn to leave. They reached his cabin as twilight settled. Wyatt helped her down from the horse, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Clara, he started. Don't. She stepped back, not trusting herself. Don't make this harder. I need to think. I need to figure out what I'm doing before you what? The question hung between them, laden with possibility and danger. Clara looked at this man who'd become so essential so quickly, and felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling. Before I make a choice I can't take back, she whispered. Wyatt's expression was unreadable in the fading light. Some choices aren't meant to be taken back, Clara. Some you just have to trust. He turned and led his horse to the barn, leaving her standing in the snow, her packed bag still waiting inside, her future balanced on a knife's edge. Clara looked up at the emerging stars, so much brighter here than they'd ever been in the city. The world felt enormous and terrifyingly open, full of paths she could take. The question was which one led toward the life she actually wanted, rather than the one she thought she should want, and whether she was brave enough to admit the difference. Clara didn't sleep that night. She lay in the darkness, listening to the cabin settle around her, the pop of cooling wood, the whisper of wind through the eaves, the sound of Wyatt shifting restlessly in the loft above. Every creak of the floorboards told her he wasn't sleeping either. At dawn, she rose and found him already at the stove, his movements mechanical. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "We should leave soon," he said without turning. "Get you to the station before afternoon." Clara poured herself coffee with shaking hands. The moment had arrived, time to step onto that train, to choose Denver and independence and the future she'd claimed she wanted. "Wyatt, last night you don't need to explain." His voice was carefully neutral. "You're doing what you came here to do. Moving forward with your life. That's exactly what you should be doing." The words were right, but something in his tone felt wrong, too controlled, too final. Clara set down her cup. "What if I don't want to go?" Wyatt's hands stilled on the coffee pot. "Don't say that." "Why not? It's the truth." "Because," he turned to face her, and the naked pain in his eyes stole her breath. "Because I can't be the reason you stay. Clara, I won't be another cage you trap yourself in, another choice someone else makes for you. You're not listening. Nobody's making this choice except me." "Are you sure about that?" His voice rose, frustration breaking through his usual control. "Or are you just scared of Denver, of being alone, so you're clinging to the first safe harbor? You found? In 6 months, a year, you'll resent me for being the reason you didn't try." Clara felt anger flash hot in her chest. "You don't get to decide what I'll feel. You don't get to protect me from my own choices. And you don't get to make decisions based on gratitude or fear or—" He stopped himself, jaw clenched. "Or what? Say it. Or whatever this is between us." The words came out rough. "Because I can't tell if it's real or if it's just two lonely people finding comfort in proximity. And I've already lost everyone I loved once. I won't survive doing it again." The confession hung in the air between them. Clara saw it then, the real fear beneath his resistance. He wasn't pushing her away to protect her freedom. He was protecting himself from the possibility of loving someone who'd eventually leave. Wyatt. She crossed to him, close enough to touch but not touching. "I'm not Emily. I'm not your son. Whatever happens between us, whatever we choose, it won't be what happened before." "You can't promise that." "No, I can't." She reached up, cupping his weathered face in her hands, feeling him tremble. "I can't promise I won't hurt you. I can't promise this will work. But I can promise that if I leave today, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Not because of what might have been, but because I let fear make my choice instead of making it myself." Wyatt closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that for the first time in my life, I understand the difference between being forced to stay and choosing to stay. My family wanted to trap me in a life I didn't choose. But staying here with you, that's not a trap. That's just where I want to be. Clara, you barely know me. You've been here 2 weeks, long enough to know you're honest when most men lie, kind when most men are cruel, that you value integrity over comfort, and you've built a life that's true to yourself even though it's lonely." She pulled his forehead down to rest against hers. "Long enough to know that walking away from this would be the stupidest thing I've ever done." His hands came up to grip her wrists, not pulling away but holding on. "What about Denver? The job? Your independence?" "Independence isn't about being alone, Wyatt. It's about choosing your own path, even if that path includes someone else." Clara's voice strengthened with certainty. "I didn't leave my family to prove I could survive alone. I left because I refused to let anyone else write my story. And this staying here, building something with you, that's still my story. My choice." Wyatt opened his eyes and she saw tears glinting there. "I don't know how to do this, how to let someone in again." "Neither do I. My whole life I've kept walls up, kept people at arm's length, because getting close meant giving them power over me." She smiled tremulously. "So we'll figure it out together. We'll make mistakes and argue and probably drive each other insane sometimes, but it'll be real. It'll be ours." "You're absolutely certain?" "Because once you make this choice, once you stay, Clara, I won't let you go easily. I'll fight for this, for us. Good, she pulled him closer. Because I didn't come all this way just to settle for easy. Wyatt kissed her then, desperate and tender and full of terrified hope. Clara kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't articulate into the connection, all her fear and longing and determined courage. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. I need you to be sure. Take the day. Think about what you're giving up. I'm not giving up anything. Clara's voice was steady. I'm choosing something different than I planned. That's not the same as sacrifice. They spent the day working side by side, Clara learning to feed the horses, Wyatt teaching her the rhythms of ranch life. She was clumsy at first, unused to physical labor, but she threw herself into each task with fierce determination. At noon, they ate lunch in comfortable silence. Wyatt kept glancing at her as if she might disappear, and Clara caught herself doing the same, checking that this was real, that she hadn't imagined making this choice. Late afternoon brought another visitor. Tom Sullivan rode up with a concerned expression. Didn't see you at the station. Thought maybe the roads had gotten bad. Again. The roads are fine, Wyatt said, one arm casually draped around Clara's shoulders. Plans changed. Tom looked between them, and understanding dawned on his young face. A slow grin spread across it. Well, hell, Catherine's going to win the bet. Was there a bet? Clara asked, mortified. Whole county was betting on whether you'd get on that train. Tom laughed. Catherine said you'd stay before spring. Ben gave it until summer. I had my money on you making it to Denver and coming back within the year. How much did Catherine win? Wyatt asked, amused despite himself. $20 from Ben alone. She's insufferably smug about being right. Tom tipped his hat to Clara. Welcome to the neighborhood, Miss Whitmore. Fair warning, Catherine's already planning a barn dance to celebrate. You've been here 2 weeks and she's already adopted you. After Tom left, Clara turned to Wyatt. The whole county was betting on us. Small community, not much else for entertainment. He pulled her close. Besides, apparently we weren't as subtle as we thought. That evening, they sat by the fire together, Clara's head on Wyatt's shoulder, his arm secure around her waist. The violin sat within reach, and eventually he picked it up, playing the same melancholy melody he'd played before. But this time, when he finished, the silence felt different, not empty but full of possibility. I wrote to Tom's sister, Clara said quietly, turning down the job offer. I also wrote to Ruth Brennan, the woman from the train. Told her I found where I needed to be. Any regrets? Not a single one. She tilted her head to look at him. Though, I should probably learn to do something useful. I can't just cook and mend forever. Catherine's always looking for help with her horses. Says she needs someone with gentle hands for the young ones. Wyatt tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. And there's talk of bringing a real doctor to the county. They'd need someone too. Help run a clinic. I'd like that. Being useful. Being part of something. Clara traced the calluses on his palm. Building a life instead of just surviving one. It won't always be easy, Wyatt warned. Winters are brutal. Money's tight. The work never ends, and I'm hesitated. I'm not good at talking about feelings. I'll close up sometimes, retreat into my head. You'll have to be patient with me. And I'll probably drive you crazy with questions and opinions, and insisting we do things properly instead of just getting by. Clara smiled. We'll work on it together. Wyatt kissed the top of her head. I never thought I'd have this again. Someone to come home to. Someone who makes this place feel like more than just shelter. I never thought I'd want it, Clara admitted. All my life I equated partnership with imprisonment. But this, what we're building, it doesn't feel like giving up my freedom. It feels like finally understanding what freedom actually means. What's that? Choosing where you belong, who you belong with. She turned in his arms to face him fully. I belong here, Wyatt, with you. Not because I'm afraid or grateful or running from something else, but because when I imagine my future, this is what I see. This cabin, these mountains, this life. You. His eyes glistened. I love you, Clara Whitmore. I didn't think I had that in me anymore, but you brought it back. To life. I love you too. The words felt natural, right? And we're going to build something remarkable here. Not because it'll be perfect, but because it'll be true. Outside, snow began falling again, gentle this time, not the brutal storm that had nearly killed her, but a soft blanket covering the world in fresh possibility. Clara stood at the window, Wyatt's arms around her from behind, and watched the flakes drift down. Somewhere back east, her family was going about their lives, perhaps believing she'd failed, perhaps never thinking of her at all. But Clara felt no regret, no longing for what she'd left behind. She'd traded gilded cages for open sky, obligation for choice, appearances for authenticity. And she'd found something her family had never understood. That true freedom wasn't about being alone. It was about choosing your own path, even when that path led somewhere unexpected, even when it led home. What are you thinking? Wyatt murmured against her hair. Clara leaned back into his solid warmth, watching the snow transform the landscape into something new and beautiful. I'm thinking, she said softly, that I finally understand what it means to choose myself. Not in spite of loving you, but because of it. Because staying here, building this life with you, that's not surrender. That's the bravest thing I've ever done. Wyatt tightened his arms around her. Then let's be brave together. As night settled over the mountain ranch, Clara Whitmore stood in the cabin that had become her home, in the arms of the man who'd saved her life, and then taught her how to truly live it. The future still held uncertainty, harsh winters, hard work, the daily challenge of building something lasting from fragile hope. But for the first time, Clara faced that uncertainty without fear, because she'd learned that the opposite of being trapped wasn't being alone. It was being brave enough to choose, to really choose where your heart belonged, and hers belonged. Here, in this small cabin, with this quiet man, in these endless mountains where she'd finally found the freedom she'd been seeking all along. Not the freedom from something, but the freedom to choose. Something worth fighting for, something worth staying for, something worth calling home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't